It's the Kink Consultant Podcast, where we're turning up the heat on all things kink and dating, relationships, and pop culture. So close the door, plug in your headphones, and let's get down to it. Hey everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the Kink Consultant. I am joined by Cate Osborn, also famously known as Cate Osborn on Instagram, TikTok, across the web. Cate is an educator, she's a full-time content creator, an author, all of the things. Plus, on top of that, are you getting your PhD?
I am getting my PhD. I will be Dr. Cate in a couple of years. So that's like a little wild. It's a little crazy.
That is a high level of dedication.
I like talking about sex on the internet. Why not just double and triple down on it? Go for the full EGOT. Maybe I will be the first person to get an EGOT, but just talking about sex and intimacy. I don't know what that looks like, but we'll start with the Broadway musical and go from there.
Yeah. You could set the tone. Write the musical first.
Kink, the musical.
That's exactly what I'm looking for. We're off to a strong start in discussing today's topic. One of the things that I first came across when someone said, oh, the overlap between kink and people with ADHD, the Venn diagram's a circle. And while I don't think it's that close, I have almost no evidence to point me in the opposite direction. Actually, I have one kinky friend who is totally neurotypical, not ADHD. So like I have a sample size of one who's not, and then about 100 kinky friends.
I like to say that it's a stack of pancakes. They're not perfectly in line, but there's always some outliers. The little squiggly pancake corners, those are for the neurotypicals.
And we love them.
I love them just the same. They're still delicious.
Absolutely. I'll get my kink from any trusted source.
Exactly, yeah. Right?
Okay, so that is how I first came across you 2 years ago on Instagram, and I was like, they make a lot of sense. I'm feeling this. So with that said, you're constantly putting out content right now that I think so many of us can relate to. Navigating life with ADHD in the first place.
Mm.
How did you get into this level of education? What inspired this?
Spite is my
Love
answer.
it.
Pure spite, Amanda. Yes. Basically, I got diagnosed with ADHD the day before my 30th birthday. And up until that point, I didn't know that I was neurodivergent. I thought that I had just missed some crucial memo about existing in the world. And I was failing. I was drowning. I felt inherently broken and like there was something wrong with me. I wound up going to get an ADHD diagnosis. And that moment unlocked everything for me. Suddenly I had structures. I knew what to Google. I had a container by which I could understand my brain and the way that I move through the world. But the thing was, is that I didn't know anything about ADHD. I just knew that ADHD was a thing that existed. And as far as I knew, it mostly affected 7-year-old boys. And so I'm a nerd. My background is in research and academia. And so I started learning about ADHD. And the more that I started learning about ADHD, the more I started noticing that there were all of these conversations that weren't being had. There were all of these places where there were these monumental gaps in the conversation, especially around topics that selfishly, very personally affected me. Things about ADHD and hormones and intimacy and relationships. And intimacy is a place where I have always struggled. I've always found difficulty in relating to my body and my sexuality and my gender and like all of those different things. And so the more that I started learning about ADHD, the more I started learning that there was this profound connection. So I went back to school to become a certified sex educator. And the story that I always tell is that on the first day of class, we were talking about what happens when something goes wrong during sex or something funny happens during a scene. And the instructor said very specifically, the moment is not precious. You can just get back into it, just jump back into it. And I remember being like, I have a question. What if you have ADHD and the moment is always precious? I just realized how underrepresented ADHD neurodivergent voices as a whole in conversations around sex and intimacy. What happens when conversations around consent involve people who don't have a good working memory, people who may struggle with communication or go nonverbal? And so I decided that I needed to be the change that I wanted to see in the world, and I started talking about it. What happened was a lot of people found their way to my content who had been feeling exactly like me. So yeah, a few million follows and a couple of 100 million views later. Here, I have a book coming out, I have a podcast, I have all this like great stuff that I'm doing. To make a very long answer longer, my answer is I did it because of spite.
I love it. But no, that's your origin story. And that example of the moment is not precious versus no, it actually is for some people.
Yeah.
Super precious that moment.
Yeah. My whole thing is executive functioning and how executive functioning and sensory processing ties into intimacy. One of the things that I genuinely get frustrated about is the fact that you don't have to be neurodivergent to have conversations about executive functioning. You don't have to be neurodivergent to talk about sensory issues or sensory preferences. You probably have a blanket that you love and a blanket that you hate, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And so it's that kind of thing. The work that I'm doing isn't just for people with ADHD. It is for people who want to improve their intimacy and have better, deeper, and more meaningful conversations. It just happens that a lot of what I talk about is kink because that shit, chef's kiss.
Well, for so many reasons, and you talk about that frequently. One of the reasons it's so relatable, I'm sure, for people who are neurotypical, is that you're still breaking it down at such a fine level that everyone can be part of the conversation. It just opens door for everyone.
Yeah, not to toot my own horn, but yeah, I certainly try.
You do it well. And yes, toot away, please.
Toot.
I want to talk about the book because it's about adulting with ADHD, right? I'm sure you talk to people all the time who are probably a similar story to you. They were diagnosed as adults, but in the spectrum of being diagnosed with something you've had your whole life, old.
Yeah, so the book is called The ADHD Field Guide for Adults. It's available for pre-order now. You can pre-order it from wherever there is a pre-order to be had. I love suggesting bookshop.org so you can support indie bookstores, but if you are an Amazon person, you can do that. Barnes & Noble, you can also go to simonandschuster.com. It's right on their website as well. So anywhere you want to buy, I would appreciate it.
Love it. Okay, tell us more.
Looking at books about ADHD and looking at the resources that were available, I got frustrated because so many books about ADHD are grounded in this idea that ADHD is this burden to overcome. And in some ways, it is. Living with ADHD can be challenging. But ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Deficit and disorder are part of the names, right?
Yes.
So it's like, imagine you go to the doctor and you get diagnosed with like fuck up disease. You're like, oh no, I've got fuck ups, right?
Yeah.
The way that we talk about ADHD is so deficit based. Here's all the things that you suck at. Here's all the things that you can't do. And that's really frustrating. And the second thing is that a lot of the literature around ADHD is ironically inaccessible for people with ADHD. It is hard to read. It's walls of text. It's science jargony heavy. And a huge percentage of people with ADHD deal with learning differences, dyscalculia, dyslexia, that kind of thing. Why are we making books about ADHD that are difficult for people with ADHD to read? That seems silly to me. And then conversations that we weren't having. Where are the ADHD books about sex and intimacy? That's useful information to have in context with ADHD. And so I basically said, fucking Leroy Jenkins, I guess I'll just write the book. And I did. So the ADHD Field Guide for Adults is specifically designed for people with ADHD. It is bite-sized chunks. You can literally treat it like a bathroom reader. So you can whip it open to any page. You're going to learn something. There's all different topics, everything from navigating intimacy and relationships to household chores, how to feed yourself. There's recipes. There's history of ADHD, basically like a brain dump about ADHD in book form, specifically designed layout-wise, text-wise, font-wise, even to be very dyslexia, dyscalculia friendly. And I'm really proud of that because we really had to fight to get the book to be the way that we wanted the book to be because there's not a lot of books that exist like that. And so it was really interesting going through the process of getting the book published and the conversations that we had to have. And yeah.
First of all, that's fascinating. Imagining you writing lots of Post-it notes or something.
The entire book was Post-it notes. We had a wall in the office of Post-it notes, and then slowly a Post-it note at the time, it became a book. And yeah, I'm really proud of it. And it's just weird. It exists now. And I'm just like,
yeah. And you made it.
And I made it. It exists.
Every time I have someone who's written a book, they're like, I fought for the book to be this way because you are the expert in this space and you're creating a new blueprint for people.
Yeah.
That sounds so accessible and something everyone would want to read because it sounds fun to
I
read.
hope. I hope so. I mean, and like we even tried to include sections that aren't for people with ADHD. So we have a chapter that is just for the partners of people with ADHD. We have chapters for parents of kids with ADHD who might not understand, who might face challenges in terms of why are you like this? Because so often the ADHD narrative becomes, again, that deficit, that frustration, that why can't you just do the thing? But just doing the thing when you have ADHD is such a complicated and nuanced thing that we really want to just break it down into nitty gritty details and say, here's what it's actually like trying to do the thing. Here's how your executive functioning works in striving to do the thing. And truthfully, sometimes you can strive as much as you want, but sometimes your systems are going to fail. Sometimes as much as you set yourself up for failure, stuff is going to happen. And in those moments, that's where kindness, that's where compassion, that's where forgiving yourself and supporting yourself, that's what is important. Yes, you're going to lose your keys sometimes, but how you treat yourself while you're losing them, that's the most important thing. And so that's a really big core message of the book.
Oh, fuck, I want to cry. No, I know. I know that sounds so silly, but you're talking about aftercare for when you fuck up.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I use that word because I feel like, I fucked up.
Yeah.
And I'm really annoyed at myself and I forget to be kind.
People say things like, treat yourself how you would treat a friend. And I would never say to a friend the things that I say to myself in my head. I would never treat my friend the way that I often treat myself and punish myself for the small, meaningless things that I screw up. And I really wanted to delve into that because I think that is a learned behavior that comes out of rejection sensitivity and the PTSD of living as an undiagnosed neurodivergent adult where you're just trying and you can't keep up and you can't fit in. There's lots of interesting studies about how much more negative messaging kids with ADHD get across their lives. They get 9,000 times or 9,000 more negative messaging about themselves as like neurotypical kids. And so growing up, I didn't know that I was different. I didn't know that I needed different kinds of supports. And now I do. And so I can work on forgiving myself.
And also learning to advocate for yourself then in the world, because sometimes you do get negative messages from friends going and saying that you're late. There is negative messaging even as an adult. So not everyone has ADHD and it's hard to see each other sometimes. Ahoy, Kinksters. I've got something exciting to share. I've teamed up with the Kinky Cruise to bring you in-person workshops, play parties, and a full week of sun, sea, and sexy adventure with people who get it. This is the only cruise designed just for Kinksters, and that's why I would love to see you be part of this trip. Join me on board by heading to kinkycruise.com and use code TKC50 for $50 off per person. Let's take kink to the high seas.
Yeah, it's hard to see. And the thing is that I always say is nobody notices when you do it right. If you show up on time, they go, okay, great, Amanda got here on time. There's no, oh my God, Amanda, it must have been really difficult for you to get here on time. And you don't get that recognition. It's just the assumption is you be on time. And yes, being on time is important. And I'm not saying that it's not, but it's the validation doesn't really come so much as the criticism and negative messaging when we happen to fail. And so shifting that mindset, I think, is really important.
I know, even just giving yourself a little, like, yay, I was here on time.
Yeah, exactly.
Gold star for me. Can we talk about rejection sensitivity? And I want to overlap it a little bit with kink because I work with a lot of people who are neurodivergent or obsessed with their DOMs. And if the relationship ends, they can really create a feedback loop in their head about it over and over again. And I try and work with them. It's a little bit limerence, but I also think it's a little bit rejection sensitivity.
Yeah.
So have you noticed an overlap?
Okay, so let's start at the beginning, what is rejection sensitivity? Rejection sensitivity, for those of you who don't know, is basically a heightened emotional reaction to rejection. And this is the important part. Real, parentheses, or perceived. The rejection doesn't have to be happening in order to elicit an emotional response. And I think that's something really important to keep in mind. Rejection sensitivity is not a diagnosable thing. It does not exist in the DSM. There's been a lot of interesting research around it recently. What actually is it? Is it CPTSD? Is it just ongoing internalized negative messaging? Is it anxiety? What is it? Where does it come from? Does it come from a emotional dysregulation standpoint? And the answer, I think, is yes. I think it's like a little buffet of everything. But for somebody who doesn't experience rejection sensitivity, it can be incredibly difficult to understand the profound emotional impact that can come from living with rejection sensitivity. There's been some study done on like the rate of rejection sensitivity in people with ADHD, and some people say it's as high as 95%, which is wild. But the thought process behind the reason why so many people experience it is because, let's say, being late. If you have been criticized your whole life for being late, if you know this pattern, if you know this thing that happens, it can be really easy the next time that you're late to say, oh my God, everybody hates me. All my friends are mad at me. Nobody likes me. I'm a fuck up. I'm a piece of shit. I'm irredeemable. They're just going to leave me, like that kind of thing, right? It can be really easy to fill in those gaps with rejection, with negativity. So how does that fit into kink and BDSM and intimacy as a whole? The answer might surprise you. For me, one of the biggest places that it shows up in is self-advocacy, is the unwillingness to ask for what you want, the profound fear of vulnerability, a profound fear of saying, actually, that's a little bit uncomfortable. Actually, can you please loosen the knot? Can we change the toy or whatever? There's a lot of reticence in people living with rejection sensitivity to speak up for themselves. And to extrapolate that further into really bad stuff, I see a lot of people, women especially with ADHD, who say yes when they mean no because they are afraid of being rejected. They are afraid of being left. They give permission for things that they aren't enjoying, that they are enduring, that are uncomfortable, that make them feel bad and humiliated and degraded. But that's what he's into, and he likes me. And if I say no, he might not like me anymore. And then I'm back to square one. I'm by myself, and it's my fault because I said no. And it's really upsetting, and it's a really damaging narrative. It's a really dangerous narrative. And speaking very personally, I did the same thing when I was in my 20s and I was getting into kink and into the kink scene. There were a lot of times where I didn't use the safe word. I didn't call red. I said yes when I meant no because I was in that headspace of, but who's going to like me? That rejection sensitivity of, and if I say no, he's going to be mad. If I say no, they're going to be upset. If I say no, I'm going to ruin everything. I'm going to kill the vibe. And as a result, I got injured. I got hurt. I was sexually assaulted. Like, there are real world harm from imagined and perceived rejection. And it can be really challenging to navigate through. It can be really dangerous to navigate through. And so one of the things that I spend a lot of time talking about is that self-advocacy component, is that idea of, yes, it can be scary to say no. Yes, it can be scary to speak up. But if you cannot do that, you cannot authentically be giving consent. If you cannot say no, you cannot give a consensual yes. And that goes for coercion just as much as it goes for self-imposed, rejection-sensitive, styled yeses, if that makes sense.
I mean, it all makes sense. It's tragic. It's,
Yeah.
again, as I've said multiple times already, relatable. For me, the fear was always, it's not even ruining the vibe, it's they'll leave. Like,
Yeah.
in my head, it's they will leave. I have nightmares that they will leave.
Yeah. And the leaving doesn't have to be breaking up, because that's the other thing is when I talk about rejection sensitivity for people who don't understand it is, imagine that you're really excited to get dinner with a friend. And so you text them and you say, hey, super excited to get dinner with you tonight, exclamation point. And they send you back, sounds good, period. For people who aren't living with rejection sensitivity, that's a perfectly normal conversation. For somebody who does live with rejection sensitivity, that period can start an emotional spiral that could take days to recover from. Are they mad at me? What did they mean by that? Why didn't they match my enthusiasm? Don't they understand that I'm really excited? Am I bothering them? Did I upset them by text messaging them through the day? You can go on and on. You can cycle and cycle and cycle, right? But that idea of being left doesn't necessarily mean, oh, they won't be my friend anymore. It can include that. But it can also be being left in terms of they're not going to respond to my text, or they're going to leave me on red, or they're going to just be weird at dinner because I was too enthusiastic. That kind of leaving as well, I think, is important to name.
Thank you so much, because I have some really good friends who I can obsess and talk out these things with. But then I have some people who are like, are you fucking crazy? When I vocalized, oh my gosh, I'm feeling nervous about this situation.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think Cate the Educator comes out. And so the follow-up then is that this is a learned behavior. This is a pattern matching learned behavior that you have internalized through years and years that I have internalized. Like, I'm not saying, oh, it's just a you problem.
Yeah.
Like, I have also internalized through years of these kind of experiences. Maybe it comes, again, where does it come from? Does it come from anxiety? Does it come from CPTSD? Who knows? But honestly, at the end of the day, who gives a shit, because it's affecting us. And that's the thing that I'm interested in. So the thing to keep in mind is that you can break that rejection sensitivity spiral. You can work on naming those thoughts as that is a thought that is grounded in my rejection sensitivity. As you work to strengthen that muscle, you can reduce the severity of rejection sensitivity. You can reduce the impact that it has. And you can also learn skills and tools that you can put in your toolbox, like self-advocacy, practicing asking for what you want. A big one, genuinely, is practicing saying no. Working with your partner, all you're going to do tonight is just say no. Say no to me if I ask you for a glass of water, if I ask you to hold your hand, if I ask you if I can give you whatever it might be, you're going to say no to me, and you're going to say no all night. And every time you do, I'm going to give you a little reward. I'm going to give you a piece of candy. I'm going to give you a sticker, whatever. But rejection sensitivity is not a chronic sentence. Once you know that you are dealing with it, there are absolutely steps to and including therapy, journaling, workbooking, that kind of thing to help break those spirals. But yeah, it takes a ton of work. It takes a ton of time. It can feel daunting, but the more I think that you practice those self-advocacy and asking for what you want moments, the more you're able to say, hey, actually, this is a friend that I've known and loved for years and years. I don't think that they're going to end our friendship over a rogue period instead of an exclamation point. So maybe I can thank that part of my brain worrying about me and wanting to protect me, but we're safe, we're okay, and we can move on with our day. And that was one of the most powerful changes that I made, was just saying, hey, thanks. I appreciate you trying to watch out for me, but I have to do some work now. So we're going to work.
That's so caring, and like to be that way with yourself.
I mean, you have to be. You have to be compassionate, because who else is going to be, right? Maybe you're lucky. Maybe you have a caring partner. Maybe you have somebody who really understands ADHD, but they don't know what it's like in your head. And if you can't grant yourself kindness, if you can't grant yourself forgiveness, you are immediately setting yourself up for so much despair and rejection and unkindness. You don't even have to like yourself. That's the thing. What does RuPaul say? If you can't love yourself, I think that's bullshit. I don't like that as a statement. I don't like it, because I think sometimes it can be hard to love yourself. It can be hard to like yourself, especially if you are a person who gets easily frustrated with ADHD or just your brain in general. But what you can do is you can be kind to yourself. That's different. You don't have to like yourself to be kind to yourself.
It's a good bar. Yeah, the kindness thing. Thank you for so much of that, because I think that was really,
I feel like all of my answers are really long, and I'm really sorry. I just have a lot to say.
Oh, please don't apologize. But it's also really relatable to kink. The way you described accepting that rejection sensitivity and having gratitude for it is how I tell people to start using safe words. When I hear over and over again, like they don't want a safe word out, then just have an hour-long session where all you're doing is practicing saying yellow and having a quick repair and then moving back into it. So it's not a boogeyman.
Yeah, 100%. Like, I honestly think this is, I'm going to get canceled on the internet for saying this out loud, but the reason why I think I love what I do so much is because conversations around neurodivergency and communication are exactly the same as they are for like kink and communication. Because I go all over the world, right? I travel all over the world, all over the country, doing like workshops and speaking gigs and teaching about intimacy and communication and that kind of stuff. And there are a couple of workshops that I teach that genuinely the only thing I have to do is I go, okay, is this a kink convention, a more non-specific ADHD or gaming convention? And I say kink or I say neurodivergence, and that's the difference. The script remains the same. And it's because it's the same stuff. We're dealing with the same stuff and the same issues. And people always relate. I always feel like I'm going to get in trouble for saying that out loud, but it's so funny and it's so true.
I almost feel like I have learned coping mechanisms that I didn't know I had, and then I'm teaching them to other people because it's kink related. It's coded. I'm like, oh yeah, saying yellow or red is hard, but it doesn't kill you. In fact, it saves you, right?
Yeah. Like green, yellow, red. You know what that is? That is internalized mechanism for avoiding meltdown. That is a check-in moment for avoiding overstimulation and not passing your comfort threshold. And so much of conversation around kink, you can apply to neurodivergence and vice versa. Fundamentally, when you break it down into its core components, what is kink? It is controlling sensation, it is controlling structure, and it is externalizing communication and feedback into something that is very clear, cut and dry. And so if you are neurodivergent, that's going to be a pretty good fit for you. You would get to control the stimulus in your environment. You get to control the way that you are interacting with people. There is a clear, cut and dry standard of behavior and rules, maybe even that you're following. And you get to just be direct and to the point, and you are saying the quiet part out loud. It's perfect for neurodivergent.
The stage is set for you to act that way.
And you are set up for success. You are set up for success across the board. Even like aftercare. Again, aftercare is another core component. We're emotionally regulating. We're making sure that we're not hitting our overstimulation threshold. I'll die on the hill that kink is like like one of the most powerful tools for neurodivergent people. Like, you don't
Absolutely.
even have to be kinky. That's the thing. You don't have to want to do any of the kinky stuff. You have to want to get tied up, or you don't have to get blindfolded or spanked or whatever. But the way that the kink community facilitates conversation and communication and consent is such a beautiful roadmap and template for neurodivergent people. Like, you can take that stuff and you can be like, hey, this is how I'm going to talk to my boss. This is how I'm going to communicate my needs at work. It is applicable in every direction and every part of your life. And I think that's cool.
I agree completely. I think that I have conversations with my family. Sometimes families butt heads. I have learned better communication by communicating like a kinkster and saying,
Yeah, exactly.
when you did this, I felt this way. And for some reason, that framework is so easy to follow in kink, at least for me. Whereas in things where it's emotionally fraught or deeper relationships outside of kink, longer term friendships, it can be difficult because the rejection sensitivity, like, oh, if I bring my true self to this. Whereas in the kink world, I don't know, it's just always felt right.
Yeah.
Speaking of,
Yes.
when did you know you were kinky?
Younger than I want to comfortably put on the internet.
Five. Because I have a fetish and I've had a spanking.
Yeah, I would say about one of my really early kinky memories is I think I was probably 6 or 7, and I was watching Meet Me in St. Louis at my grandparents' house, and there's that scene where Judy Garland is getting laced into the corset, and I was like, oh, I feel some kind of way. I didn't know what a corset was, but I saw that and I was like, I want that. I want to experience that. And I remember getting older as a little kid and wanting the experience of wearing a corset. And I started doing theater. And so as a teenager, I was in a show where I got to wear a corset for the first time. And oh my God, like my dream is finally coming true. I'm finally getting to do this thing that I've wanted to do. And I felt so fucking powerful. I was unstoppable. But yeah,
I feel like it's happening.
Yeah, I was like, it's happening. I love corsets. I love lingerie as a whole. That sensory experience of being both constricted, I guess, but comfortably. I think that shit is so goddamn sexy.
Was it as good as you imagined?
I don't know if it was as good as I would have imagined, because I was like an awkward underage teenager getting laced into a corset by like a really unfortunate, mean costume lady who hated my guts. But I at least got my goals. And then when I was older and I was able to shop for my own, and it was a little bit better. But yeah, a lot of my fantasies involve elaborate costuming. And so I don't know if that's an ADHD thing, just so much as like a fucking nerd thing, but here we are.
I might be a nerd, but I don't identify as a nerd because I'm not a gamer.
That's fair.
However, I will tell you, when I was a kid, when I get older and have all my own money, I'm going to buy a room full of costumes. Props to me, I do have a room full of costumes. They just weren't what I was expecting them to
Yeah,
look
you know what? Yeah. I actually have both. I have the room full of costumes, and then I have the room full of costumes, which are two different categories.
Yeah, I just have one room of costumes. And it started when I was a professional dominatrix, and that's where the collection started.
Oh my God. I also was a pro dom when I was in grad school. That was how I paid a lot of my grad school bills. I don't know if I would do it now, but when I was doing it, it was great, and I really enjoyed it. And it was before I knew I was neurodivergent. It helped me shape my understanding of why people come to kink and how they come to kink and how they show up, and how so much of kink is just based on need, like a need to be seen and validated and appreciated. And so a lot of dom energy, I don't step into it very often, but I think sometimes she shows up in my content. I want to meet people with that energy because I'm really good at that energy and I really enjoy being in that energy. But I don't know if Cate Osborn, the pro dom, is something that's necessarily feasible.
It's funny how you're basically describing Cate Osborn, the pro dom, integrated into the you now. Like, let that go. This other cool part of you that gets to come through your content.
Yeah, it's every so often at like a kink convention, I'll let her out.
I would make a much better dom now in my mid-30s than I did in my mid-20s.
Oh yeah. When I'm like 50, I'm just going back. We're bringing her back. All right, everybody. I've done everything else I wanted to do. We're going back to it. Because I'm like, I understand a lot more now than I did when I was doing it. So
I say this in the first few episodes of my podcast. I talk all about it. Back then, what I did was I just did the job I do now. Honestly, I talked to people. I dug into why they felt shame, how they might feel less shame, how they could possibly bring it up with their partner. All the work I do now. Same thing.
There's a couple of regulars who would come to me who had the most, and I don't say this judgmentally, but small, tiny asks. Then they would come to me and the gratitude that I would experience. There's one guy who wanted me to paint his nails. Okay, great. And I would go over and we would hang out. We would watch Star Trek and I would paint his nails. And he was the most grateful. And he was like, I could never ask my girlfriend. I would be so embarrassed. I think I learned a lot about how being seen and communicating in relationships is so important to understanding the person.
It's hard though, right? It's not actually hard to do. It's hard to get past the preconceived notion. Like that person definitely believed they would be left if their
Yeah.
girlfriend found out they like
Which
nails painted.
that rejection sensitivity, you
Yeah.
know, like it is like by definition, that is what that was. That fear. And I don't know if he was actually living with rejection sensitivity as the community collectively talks about it, but there was a fear of rejection. There was a fear of, I can't possibly bring up wanting to wear green nail polish once a week to my girlfriend. Like, what would she think of me? That is my mission in life, is giving people permission to just ask for the goddamn thing that they want, because it just floors me how many people are in long-term 10, 15, 20-year relationships and they can't have conversations about sex with their partner. They can't ask for what they want with their partner. And then I was like, I get it. I fundamentally get it on a level of somebody who has absolutely been there. And I remember being afraid and I remember the headspace. There's also part of me that is just like, guys, we got to do better, man. We got to do better.
I did build my business on that exact model. Let me just bring two people together and be like, look, no one's leaving. We're here to talk about it.
Yeah.
Let's get to it. And one of my favorite things to normalize it, think about the weird shit you and your partner do as a couple that you would never tell the outside world.
Yeah.
Kink is actually no different. More times than not, it's fear of what society would think stops people from opening up. But if you were to put cameras in your house, there's a lot of weird shit you're all doing in your house.
Oh, yeah. Like, do you sing to your dog? It's the same thing.
Yes.
Sing me the song that you sing to your dog. No, you don't want to do that? Cool.
Yeah.
That's fine.
And it's just like, I think normalizing it in ways like that is really important, because people are like, oh, you're right. I wouldn't let someone see that I clip my toenails while watching TV, because no, you do that in the bathroom. I just like to make it a real world random thing where, okay, people might judge, but it's not a relationship ending situation.
That's like you're supposed to clip your toenails in the bathroom. You're supposed to match your socks. You're supposed to fold your laundry, to bring it all the way back around. I think that's one of the reasons why I like educating about ADHD, because there are so many supposed tos that we get fed. Put your keys on a hook by the door. Match your socks when you take them out of the dryer. If eating breakfast, lunch, and dinner doesn't work for you, and eating a bunch of tiny meals throughout the day works for you, at least you're feeding yourself. At least you're keeping your socks clean. I throw all my socks in a bin unmatched. I don't match my socks. Sue me, right? But that's the same way I feel about kink. You can learn the skill of rejecting the supposed to, or the just. Why don't you just match your socks? Why don't you just fold your laundry? Just keep a planner. If you can use your rejection sensitivity to reject that supposed to, change your life, man. Go get spanked. Go get tied up. Go get blindfolded. It's good for you.
Thank you so much, Kate. That was beautiful. Absolutely.
Thanks for having me.
If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with anyone who might find it interesting. And if you have any questions or topics you'd like me to cover in future episodes, feel free to reach out. Email info@thekinkconsultant.com. Until next time, keep on kinking on.